A desperate thud echoes beneath the frozen Yellowstone River in 1879, where a single choice can mean life or death. Clara O'Donnell, a 14-year-old girl with her father's heart, braves a Montana winter to defy a town's hatred. In Copper Creek, whispers of Comanche threats fuel fear, but Clara's courage will spark a reckoning that could heal or shatter a community. What drives a child to risk everything for a stranger? How will her defiance reshape a frozen land? Subscribe now, ring the bell, and comment where you're listening from. Will Clara's heart triumph over ice and lies? Stay to uncover a tale of grit and redemption. The Yellowstone River lay locked in ice, a gray slab under a sky heavy as iron in the winter of 1879. Copper Creek, a mining town clinging to Montana's edge, was a scatter of sagging shacks and broken dreams, its air thick with the acrid bite of coal smoke and fear. Whispers of Comanche raiders slithered through the saloon's warped boards, stoking dread in hearts already bruised by hardship. Clara O'Donnell, barely 14, trudged toward the river's bank, her boots crunching snow that glittered like shattered glass, her breath puffed white, her slight frame bundled in a patched coat, her red hair tucked under a wool cap. She carried a hemp sack for firewood and her father's rusted ice pick, its weight a tether to a man long gone. Clara lived with her pregnant mother in a lean-to at the town's fringe, where the wind howled louder than the townsfolk's scorn. Her father, Tom O'Donnell, had been a miner with hands rough as granite and a heart that believed kindness could outlast cruelty. A hand outstretched saves a life, he'd said, before fever took him 2 winters back. Clara clung to those words like a prayer, though Copper Creek saw her as a burden, a half-wild girl unfit for their dwindling hopes. The river was her refuge, its frozen expanse honest in its brutality, unlike the town's pinched faces and Sheriff Hammond's venomous lies about savages beyond the horizon. She moved with purpose, her hazel eyes scanning the snow for deadfall. The river's ice gleamed, treacherous under a thin crust of frost, each step cracked like a pistol shot in the stillness. Clara's sack was half full of brittle pine when a sound stopped her cold, a faint, rhythmic thud, like a heart struggling to beat. It came from the river. Her pulse quickened, a drumbeat against her ribs. She dropped the sack, her breath shallow, and crept to the ice's edge. The sound grew sharper, a desperate knock from below. Kneeling, she brushed snow aside, her fingers numb, and peered through the ice's cloudy veil. A shadow moved beneath, a man's face, pale and strained, his mouth gaping for air that wasn't there. Her heart lurched. He was Comanche, his dark hair plastered wet, his eyes wide with the terror of a trapped animal. Clara's mind flashed to the saloon's tales, raiders who'd slit throats for a horse, shadows to be shot on sight. Sheriff Hammond's voice, oily and cold, echoed in her head, warning of blood beyond the treaty line. The safe choice was to run, to let the ice claim its prize. But then she saw her father's face in her mind, his calloused hand pulling a miner from a collapsed shaft, his voice steady. No one's left behind. Clara's grip tightened on the ice pick, its rust biting her palm. She wouldn't let a man drown, not while she could stand. The ice was thick, a foot at least, and her arms were thin as willow switches. She swung the pick, the point biting shallow, sending chips flying. Her breath rasped, her shoulders burned, but she struck again, each blow a defiance of the town's hate. Blood seeped from her knuckles, staining the snow red. The man's thuds weakened, his movements sluggish, the cold stealing his strength. Clara's fear turned to fury. "Hold on!" she shouted, her voice raw, swallowed by the wind. The ice groaned, a crack spiderwebbing from her blows. She drove the pick harder, her small frame heaving, until a slab broke free with a sound like thunder. Water surged, black and bitter, as she reached in, her hands numb in the freezing current. She grabbed his coat, a heavy hide slick with ice, and pulled, her boots slipping on the bank. He was heavy, his body limp. But Clara braced against a rock, her muscles screaming. With a final heave, she dragged him onto the snow, his chest heaving like a bellows. He was Tahu, though she didn't know it yet, a Comanche runner, his eagle-carved token glinting at his throat. His eyes, dark as obsidian, met hers. Wary, but alive. Clara stumbled back, her breath ragged, the pick still clutched tight. The wind howled, carrying the distant clatter of Copper Creek. Tahu coughed, a wet, racking sound, his skin ashen beneath the frost. He was no raider, just a man the river nearly claimed. Clara's gaze flicked to the horizon, where Hammond's patrols might ride. If they found him, they'd drag him to town, or worse. She thought of a cave by the river, its mouth hidden by frozen willows. "Come on," she said, her voice steady despite her trembling hands. "We're not done yet." Tahu staggered to his feet, swaying, his strength sapped, but his eyes sharp with resolve. Clara led him, a shadow among shadows, toward the cave's dark promise. The ice behind them lay shattered, a testament to her choice, a choice that could save a life or damn them both. Tahu staggered to his feet, swaying, his strength sapped, but his eyes sharp with resolve. Clara led him, a shadow among shadows, toward the cave's dark promise. The ice behind them lay shattered, a testament to her choice, a choice that could save a life or damn them both. The Montana night of 1879 was a blade, its edge honed by a wind that cut through Clara's patched coat as she guided Tahu toward the riverbank's hidden cave. The Yellowstone's frozen crust gleamed under a moon pale as bone, casting jagged shadows across the snow. Clara's boots crunched, each step a gamble against the patrol's Sheriff Hammond might have sent sniffing. Tahu's coughs, wet and ragged, punctuated the silence, his breath clouding in the frigid air. His hide coat, soaked from the river, hung heavy, and the eagle-carved token at his throat glinted like a warning. Clara's heart hammered, but she kept her eyes forward, scanning the willow-draped fissure ahead. The cave's mouth was a narrow gash, veiled by frozen branches that clawed at her as she pushed through. Inside, the air was damp, smelling of earth and stone, the space barely wider than a horse stall. Tahu sank against the wall, his frame trembling, his skin gray beneath the frost's sheen. Clara's hand shook as she knelt, her father's ice pick still clutched like a talisman. She'd pulled him from death's grip, but the fever in his eyes told her the fight wasn't over. His coughs deepened, each one a fist to her gut. She knew pneumonia's shadow. Her father's last days had taught her its cruel rhythm. She dropped her sack of pine, its brittle sticks spilling across the cave's floor. "Stay put," she said, her voice low but firm, though fear gnawed at her spine. Tahu's gaze, sharp despite his weakness, held hers, a silent question she couldn't answer. Why risk this for him? Clara turned away, her hands busy to keep her mind still. She gathered the driest sticks, striking flint with a steel shard from her pocket. Sparks leaped, catching the pine's resin, and a small fire bloomed, its light dancing on the cave's rough walls. The warmth was a fragile shield against the cold that pressed in like a living thing. Clara's mother, Ellen, would be waiting at the lean-to, her swollen belly slowing her steps. Clara hadn't told her where she'd gone. There'd been no time. But the thought of her mother's worry was a stone in her chest. She glanced at Tahu, his head slumped, his breathing shallow. The river's foul water had poisoned him, and Copper Creek's only doctor would sooner spit on a Comanche than treat one. Clara's mind raced, sifting through memories of her father's remedies. Willow bark for fever, he'd said, showing her a stand by the river before the mines took him. It was a faint hope, but it was hers. She slipped out, the night's chill biting her face. The willow stand was a quarter-mile off, its branches skeletal against the snow. Her knife, small but sharp, cut strips of bark, her fingers stinging as sap froze on her skin. Back in the cave, she boiled the bark in a tin cup over the fire, the bitter steam curling like a ghost. Tahu stirred, his eyes glassy but tracking her movements. She lifted the cup to his lips, her hand steady despite the weight of his gaze. "Drink," she said, her voice a thread. He sipped, grimacing, but didn't pull away. Hours bled into the night, the fire's crackle a lone companion. Clara kept vigil, feeding the flames, her eyes fixed on Tahu's chest, each rise a small victory. His cough softened, but the fever clung like damp earth. She didn't sleep, her mind a tangle of fear and defiance. Copper Creek's hatred loomed beyond the cave, Sheriff Hammond's voice a poison in her memory. He'd called the Comanche raiders, thieves of cattle and lives, his lies fueling the town's hunger for a scapegoat. Clara saw no raider in Tahu, just a man, broken but breathing. His token a mystery she couldn't yet unravel. Dawn crept in, gray and reluctant, when a shadow darkened the cave's mouth. Clara's heart seized, her hand gripping the ice pick. But it was Ellen, her face pale, her shawl tight around her swollen frame. "Clara," she whispered, her voice cracking with relief and dread. Her eyes fell on Tahu, and fear flared, her hand clutching the cave's wall. "A Comanche! Here!" she hissed, her voice a blade. Clara stood, small but unyielding. "He's no enemy, Ma. He's dying without us." Ellen's gaze wavered, torn between the town's tales and her daughter's fire. Tahu's cough broke the silence, and Ellen's shoulders sagged. She saw the man, not the myth. "Help me, Ma," Clara said, her voice steady as stone. Ellen hesitated, then knelt, her hands trembling as she took the cup of willow tea. The cave held them, 2 women and a stranger, bound by a choice that could burn them all. Outside, the snow fell heavily, hiding their tracks, but Clara knew Hammond's greed would find them. The fire's light flickered, a beacon in a world that wanted them snuffed out. "Help me, Ma," Clara said, her voice steady as stone. Ellen hesitated, then knelt, her hands trembling as she took the cup of willow tea. The cave held them, 2 women and a stranger, bound by a choice that could burn them all. Outside, the snow fell heavily, hiding their tracks, but Clara knew Hammond's greed would find them. The fire's light flickered, a beacon in a world that wanted them snuffed out. The Montana winter of 1879 tightened its grip, the cave's stone walls sweating frost under the Yellowstone's frozen shadow. Clara O'Donnell sat cross-legged by the fire, its embers spitting like a cornered rattler. Tahu's breaths came steadier now, each one a small rebellion against the pneumonia clawing his lungs. Ellen, her face etched with worry, fed twigs to the flames, her swollen belly casting a soft shadow. The air smelled of burnt pine and bitter willow tea, a thin defense against the cold that pressed in like a creditor come to collect. Clara's hands, raw from the ice pick, traced the eagle token Tahu had clutched when she'd pulled him from the river. It lay on his chest, a carved promise she didn't yet understand. Tahu stirred, his eyes clearer, though fever still smoldered in them. He murmured something, a low string of Comanche words, sharp and rhythmic like hoofbeats on hardpan. Clara leaned closer, her hazel eyes catching the fire's glow. "Say it again," she urged, her voice a whisper, as if the cave itself might betray them. Tahu's lips twitched, a ghost of a smile. "Fire," he said, pointing to the flames, his English halting but deliberate. "Naisha." Clara echoed the word, her tongue clumsy but eager. "Naisha," she repeated, and Tahu nodded, his gaze holding a flicker of gratitude. She pointed to the tin cup. "Water." He tried it, the word rough as gravel. "Pah." The exchange was a fragile thread, spun in the cave's dim heart. Ellen watched, her hand still, her fear thawing as Tahu's humanity took shape. Clara taught him stone, gesturing to the cave's walls, and he offered tabe in return, touching the ground. Each word was a stone laid in a bridge between worlds, Copper Creek called enemies. Clara's chest tightened, not from fear, but from the weight of something new. This wasn't just survival. It was defiance of the lies Sheriff Hammond peddled, lies that painted Tahu as a shadow to be hunted. The fire crackled, and Clara thought of the stories her father told, of men finding common ground in the mine's dark. Those tales kept her heart steady, and if they move you too, hit that subscribe button to keep stories like this alive. Share where you're listening from. We'd love to know. Outside, the snow fell in thick curtains, muffling the world, but Clara felt the noose tightening. Hammond's men would scour the riverbank soon, their boots trampling the fragile peace of this cave. Ellen's eyes met hers, heavy with unspoken dread. "They'll come for us," she said, her voice low, her hand resting on her belly. Clara nodded, her jaw tight. She rummaged in her sack, pulling out dried choke cherries and a strip of jerky, meager rations she'd scavenged before the river. She handed them to Ellen, then tore a piece for Tahu. He took it, his fingers brushing hers, steady despite his weakness. The act was simple, but it bound them tighter than words. Tahu's cough broke the silence, softer now but still a warning. Clara boiled more willow bark, the steam stinging her eyes. She knelt beside him, lifting his head, her touch careful but sure. His eyes, dark as a storm's heart, held hers, and he spoke, his voice a rasp. "Tzaku." He touched his chest, then hers. Clara's brow furrowed, but Ellen whispered, "Friend." The word landed like a stone in still water, rippling through her. Tahu wasn't just a man she'd saved. He was a runner, a peace-bearer, his token a pledge of something greater. Clara's resolve hardened. She wouldn't let Hammond's lies bury him. The night deepened, the cave's walls closing in like a fist. Ellen hummed a hymn, faint and unsteady, a tether to the life they'd left at the lean-to. Clara's mind churned, mapping the river's bends, the paths Hammond's men might take. She remembered her father's stories of miners, signaling through shafts, using taps to find each other in the dark. Tahu's hand moved, tracing the Eagle Token's lines, his voice low. "Pia," he said, pointing to the sky beyond the cave's mouth. "Mother." Clara's throat tightened, thinking of Ellen, of the child yet to come. They were three souls, tethered by fire and will, but the world outside was a wolf circling. Dawn's gray light crept in, the snow slowing to a faint drift. Tahu's fever held, but his eyes were sharper, his voice stronger. He pointed to the token, then the horizon, his words broken but clear. "My people. Waiting." Clara's heart sank. His clan was out there, beyond the treaty line, and Hammond's greed would find them too. The cave, once a sanctuary, felt like a trap. Ellen's hand gripped Clara's, her voice a whisper. "We can't stay, girl." Clara nodded, the ice pick heavy in her pocket. The bridge they'd built with words wasn't enough. They'd have to run or fight before the snow betrayed them. Dawn's gray light crept in, the snow slowing to a faint drift. Tahu's fever held, but his eyes were sharper, his voice stronger. He pointed to the token, then the horizon, his words broken, but clear. My people. Waiting. Clara's heart sank. His clan was out there, beyond the treaty line, and Hammond's greed would find them too. The cave, once a sanctuary, felt like a trap. Ellen's hand gripped Clara's, her voice a whisper. We can't stay, girl. Clara nodded, the ice pick heavy in her pocket. The bridge they'd built with words wasn't enough. They'd have to run or fight before the snow betrayed them. The Montana blizzard of 1879 roared like a wounded beast, its snow whipping across the Yellowstone's frozen banks. Clara O'Donnell led the way, her boots sinking into drifts as she guided Tahu and Ellen through the storm's white veil. The wind howled, stinging her face like 1,000 needles, her red hair plastered under her cap. Tahu, wrapped in Ellen's spare shawl, leaned on a gnarled stick, his coughs muffled by the gale. Ellen trudged behind, her pregnant belly slowing her breath puffing in ragged clouds. The cave's shelter was gone, traded for a desperate flight toward the treaty line where Tahu's people might wait. Clara's ice pick swung at her side, a cold reminder of the fight that loomed. The river's edge was a blur, its ice buried under fresh snow. Clara's eyes stung as she scanned for landmarks, a twisted pine, a boulder half submerged in the bank. The treaty line was a mile off, marked by stones the miners had whitewashed years ago. But the storm was a traitor, erasing paths and turning the world into a blank, merciless sheet. Clara's heart pounded, her mind racing with the memory of Sheriff Hammond's voice, oily and sharp, rallying Copper Creek against savages. He'd found their tracks by now, she was sure. His men, a pack of bounty hunters and gold-drunk miners, would be closing in, their rifles loaded with hate. Tahu stumbled, his stick snapping under his weight. Clara caught his arm, her small frame straining against his bulk. "Keep moving," she said, her voice a blade through the wind. His eyes, dark and steady, met hers, and he nodded, forcing himself upright. Ellen's hand clutched Clara's shoulder, her face pale as the snow. "They're coming," she gasped, her words nearly lost. Clara's gaze flicked back, catching a flicker of movement through the blizzard, a shadow that could be a tree or a man. Her stomach twisted. Hammond's posse was no ghost story. They were wolves on the scent. The trio pushed on, the snow deepening, each step a battle against the storm's weight. Clara's hands, raw from the ice pick, burned as she gripped Tahu's arm. They reached a ravine, its walls jagged with ice-crusted rock, a narrow path to the treaty line. But the storm turned vicious, the wind a scream that drowned their breaths. Clara's cap tore free, her hair whipping like a flame. She squinted, spotting a cliff ahead, its face sheer and white, a dead end. The ravine had betrayed them, funneling them into a trap. Tahu's token gleamed at his throat, a faint hope against the storm's fury. Hooves thundered behind, faint but growing, cutting through the blizzard's roar. Clara spun, her heart a drum. Shadows emerged, Hammond's posse, 10 men strong, their coats dusted with snow, rifles glinting like fangs. Hammond rode at the front, his silver badge flashing, his grin a slash of cruelty. "Got you, girl!" he shouted, his voice carrying over the wind. "Harboring a killer!" Clara's blood surged, her hand tightening on the ice pick. Tahu wasn't a killer, but Hammond's lies were a noose, and Copper Creek had swallowed them whole. Ellen pulled Clara close, her breath ragged. "Run, Clara," she whispered. But there was nowhere to go. The cliff loomed, its base a chaos of snow and stone. Tahu straightened, his fevered frame taut with defiance, his hand clutching the eagle token. "No run," he said, his English rough but firm. Clara's jaw clenched. She stepped forward, planting herself between Tahu and the posse, the ice pick raised like a challenge. "He's no killer!" she shouted, her voice raw, cutting through the storm. "He's a peace runner, and you know it!" Hammond's laugh was a bark, sharp and ugly. "Peace? With a Comanche?" He swung down from his horse, his pistol drawn, its barrel gleaming. The posse fanned out, their eyes hard, but some wavered, their rifles dipping. Clara's stand stirred memories. Her father, Tom, pulling men from the mines, his voice steady in chaos. A miner, grizzled and lean, hesitated, his gaze flicking to Ellen's swollen belly. Hammond's grin faltered, sensing the crack in his control. "She's a traitor," he roared, stepping closer, his pistol aimed at Clara's chest. The wind dropped, a sudden hush, and a low hum rose from the hills. Clara's breath caught. Hooves, not Hammond's, echoed from beyond the cliff. Shadows moved on the ridge, a line of Comanche riders, their ponies steady, eagle feathers flickering in the storm's last gusts. Tahu raised his token, its carving catching the faint light. The posse froze, their bravado crumbling. Clara's heart raced, her small frame a defiant spark in the blizzard's heart as the riders descended, silent as judgment. The wind dropped, a sudden hush, and a low hum rose from the hills. Clara's breath caught. Hooves, not Hammond's, echoed from beyond the cliff. Shadows moved on the ridge, a line of Comanche riders, their ponies steady, eagle feathers flickering in the storm's last gusts. Tahu raised his token, its carving catching the faint light. The posse froze, their bravado crumbling. Clara's heart raced, her small frame a defiant spark in the blizzard's heart as the riders descended, silent as judgment. The Montana dawn of 1879 broke like a cracked rib, spilling pale light across the snow-choked ravine. Clara O'Donnell stood firm, her ice pick gleaming in her raw hand, her red hair a tangled flame against the white. Tahu, weak but unyielding, held his eagle token aloft, its edges sharp against the sky. Ellen clung to Clara's side, her breath shallow, her eyes wide with fear and hope. The Comanche riders, 30 strong, fanned out along the ridge, their faces carved stone, lances and rifles steady. Their silence was heavier than the storm, a wall of resolve that dwarfed Hammond's posse. The treaty line, marked by whitewashed stones, lay just beyond, a fragile line between war and truth. Hammond's face purpled, his pistol still aimed at Clara, but his hand trembled. "Back off, savages," he bellowed, his voice cracking like dry timber. The posse, 10 men with rifles shaking, glanced at each other, their certainty unraveling. Clara's stand, her small figure shielding Tahu, stirred whispers of her father, Tom, whose hands had pulled men from the mine's jaws. A miner, his beard grizzled, lowered his rifle, his eyes flicking to Ellen's swollen belly. "She's Tom's girl," he muttered, loud enough to ripple through the group. Hammond's grin twisted, a snake caught in a trap. Tahu stepped forward, his voice steady despite his fever's grip. "I am Tahu, runner of the Numanu," he said, his English rough but clear, the token raised like a banner. "No killer. I carry peace for my people." The eagle carving gleamed, its lines a story of trust, not blood. Clara's heart pounded, her eyes locked on the posse. Some shifted, their boots crunching snow, their rifles dipping lower. Hammond's lies, built on greed for Comanche land, began to fray. "He's lying!" Hammond roared, his pistol swinging toward Tahu. "He's the raider who burned Jensen's barn!" Clara's voice cut through, sharp as a blade. "No raider! You know it, Hammond!" She stepped closer, the ice pick raised, her eyes blazing. "You've been stirring hate to steal their land." The posse stirred, murmurs rising. A young miner, his face weathered beyond his years, spoke up, his voice low but firm. "Jensen's barn burned because of his own lantern, Sheriff. I saw it." The words landed like a stone in still water, rippling doubt through the posse. Hammond's eyes darted, his control slipping like sand through a fist. From the ridge, a Comanche elder descended, his pony sure-footed, his face lined like canyon walls. He raised a hand, and the riders stilled, their presence a thunder without sound. "We seek no war," he said, his English slow but heavy, each word a weight. "Tahu speaks for peace. Your lawman speaks for greed." The posse's rifles sagged, their faces pale. Clara's breath caught, her ice pick steady. She saw her father in the elder's calm, in Tahu's resolve, a strength that didn't need to shout. Hammond's rage boiled over, his pistol swinging toward Clara. "You've ruined me, girl," he snarled, his finger tightening. Before the shot could come, a crack split the air, sharp as a whip. The grizzled miner, his rifle raised, had fired, not at Hammond, but at the pistol, knocking it from his hand. Blood welled from Hammond's mangled fingers, his scream high and thin. The posse broke, two miners rushing forward, pinning Hammond to the snow. "Enough of your lies," the grizzled one spat, his voice thick with shame. The Comanche riders watched, unmoving, their lances lowered, but ready. Tahu crossed to Clara, his steps slow, but sure. "Tsaku," he said, touching his chest, then hers. "Friend." He pressed a leather strip into her hand, its eagle carving rough under her fingers. "Strong heart," he said, his eyes warm as the fire they'd shared. "When you need us, raise this. We will come." Clara nodded, her throat tight, the leather heavy with meaning. The blizzard's last flake settled, the air clearing to reveal a signal fire on the ridge, its smoke curling like a promise. The Comanches turned their ponies, vanishing into the hills, their silence a testament to trust restored. Hammond, bound by his own men, was dragged back to Copper Creek, his badge tarnished, his greed exposed. Clara and Ellen stood together, the ravine's snow stained with truth. Clara wasn't just Tom's girl anymore. She was a spark that had burned through hate, leaving a town to rebuild. The leather token lay in her palm, a reminder that one hand outstretched could shift a world. Clara's courage in the frozen Montana winter of 1879 turned a town's fear into hope, proving one heart can break the ice of hate. Her story, etched in snow and fire, lingers as a testament to defiance and truth. What stirred you most about Clara's journey? Did her stand spark hope or surprise you? Drop your thoughts in the comments and share where you're listening from. We're grateful you rode with us through this tale of grit and redemption. Spread this story to those who love a spark in the dark. Join us for more tales where heroes rise from the frost. See you in the next chapter.